Let's join together in awakening the spirit that lives within all of us, that we may live more fully and know what it truly means to love and actually be ourselves. So, welcome. Let's explore our sexuality, authenticity, yoga, and human design, all of which intersect and meet at the cross of spirit. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Cross of Spirit. I'm your host, Rocky Heron. Thank you as always for being here. So we're 3 episodes in on this wonderful experiment called podcasting. I certainly hope that you're receiving value, entertainment, inspiration, maybe a bit of confusion as well as you embark on this journey with me. Something that I heard long ago that really stuck with me is that confusion is often the first step towards clarity, and that is reflected for sure in the way that we're designed. We're meant to be confused. We're meant to seek expanded answers to the ever-evolving questions that we're faced with. And, actually something that I was able to kind of unpack recently that's made a big impact on my life is that we are designed to ask questions. We're not necessarily designed to figure out answers. We're designed to discover answers to the questions that we put forth into the quantum field. And to the extent that we can sincerely and skillfully craft questions that can queue up answers following our human design strategy and authority, can then kind of help us navigate a path towards discovering those answers. In fact, right before this episode, I was shuffling through a deck of cards that I have made by Karen Curry Parker of Quantum Human Design. Essentially, each card has a different gate on it, and the card that I pulled was gate 61, which is a gate in the head center. It's a gate that is very much interested and concerned, I suppose, with unpacking or unlocking the great mystery of life. So this gate is sort of designed to ask the question, why? Like, why am I here? Why are we here? Why is this life unfolding in the way that it is? It's not necessarily designed to figure out the answer to that question, but it certainly is designed to revel in the great mystery of wonder that is life experience. So that for sure is what informs this podcast and so much of what I do. I do happen to have this gate defined in my chart. And so I welcome you in joining me on asking those big questions about why and reveling in the unknowable. We might not ever really know why, but it certainly is fun to play with the answers that come in pursuit of this very meaningful and universal question. So what I wanted to talk about today was, or is, really, I guess, what initially compelled me to learn more about human design, which kind of fell into my lap several months ago from a friend of mine. I was receiving NLP coaching, which is neuro-linguistic programming, from a friend who's a coach and facilitator of NLP. And I really appreciate NLP because it's so much about helping us craft a more empowered story about our lives, to literally reprogram the patterns in our brain through the use of language. And I was going through this process with him and a lot of the affiliated practices and exercises, and I found that I was having a difficult time when it came to some of the goal setting aspects of the work we were doing together, where it was like, decide where you want to be in several months and write that down and craft a vision and hold on to the vision, and then supportive exercises to help manifest it. And it's always difficult for me to kind of pinpoint what my goals are or fixate on what my goals are because they seem to change quite a lot. I, in my design, have an open ajna, which is where we craft kind of our perspective, our opinions, our vision, our ideas. And so for me, with a wide open ajna, I'm very open-minded, and the ideas that are interesting to me seem to change. I sample a lot. And so I was sharing with him, just honestly, that some of these exercises were a little difficult for me, and he responded by asking for my birth time and my birth information, and then sent me screenshots from an app that described some aspects of my design. And come to find out, he was not a expert or a really all that familiar with design. Someone had just shared it with him, and he thought it was interesting, so he passed it on to me. And it really lit me up. And the thing that lit me up the most was information about my type, which is that of a generator. And what I recall from the messages he sent that stuck with me were that, generators are really here to build and construct a more beautiful world. We're here to turn the things that inspire us or that interest us into form, and that we have the stamina to really apply our life force energy dutifully and consistently in the construction of things that really interest us. That said, it's really easy to quote unquote enslave generators because we have this workforce energy and we are so conditioned to use it to other people's benefit that it's easy for us to misuse and misdirect our energy on the wrong things, which is a pretty surefire way to encounter burnout, which is where I was at the time that we were having our sessions together. And so what I learned from these brief messages was that us generators are really designed to wait. Really all types are designed to wait, but generators, based on the way our energy field operates, we're constantly drawing things to us that are rather that give us an opportunity to respond based on our availability. Are we interested in this? Are we available for this? Does this feel right for us? The themes of the generator more broadly center around work, our availability for work, and sexuality, our availability for sex or for connection or for intimacy. And so when we trust that our aura is drawing things to us, and then we know how to listen to our response to those things to determine if they are correct for us or incorrect for us, then we have a sort of inner, in-the-moment GPS system that we can use to make correct decisions and correct applications of our energy. The other thing that really stood out to me in this is that because so many of us generators know at some level that we really are here to generate, as the name suggests, a more beautiful, a more satisfying world for all of us, it's easy for us to slip into people pleasing, where we end up saying yes to the things that really are not correct for us because we get that in the moment feedback from the other that signifies that they are happy that we've said yes to the thing they want us to say yes to, and then based on other dynamics in the chart, we can really end up trying to prove our trustworthiness or prove that we have the follow through to commit to things that at some level our body was always saying no, or at least no for now too. And so the invitation was that really, for the generator, especially in the beginning of their experiment, the most important thing is to clear out of your auric field all of the things that you've said yes to that really were no's. Like clear out all the no's that are kind of clogging up or frustrating your energy, and that will enable greater flow of things or opportunities to come to you that will spark a more emphatic yes. And at the time of receiving that, there were so many aspects of my life and my business that I felt sort of trapped pursuing or engaging in or managing, that were kind of sucking a lot of my vitality and joy and life force out of me. And I had convinced myself that they were essential, and I was somewhat enslaved, by my own creations and my own endeavors. And so that really started my journey with human design, really examining in the moment my response to things, and if I was responding from a sincere place or an insincere place. So I wanted to talk today about my journey, my experiences, and what I'm learning as a generator. And I'm certain this will apply to you in some way. Generators make up about 70% of the population. So most of the people out there in the world are generators. There's different variations of the generator. You can be a pure generator. You could be an emotional generator, which means you have the sacral defined. We'll talk about that in a moment. But your authority really is much more governed by your emotions and your ability to kind of feel your way into what's correct over time. And then, of course, there's the manifesting generator, which has kind of manifestor capabilities, but still, at the root of, or at the base of what makes a generator is this sacral motor that we have defined in our chart. So if you're looking at your body graph chart, and you're invited to pull that up or look that up, if you don't already have it, you can find it at humandesignwithrocky.com. When you look at your body graph, if you see towards the bottom that the square, it's second from the bottom, usually it's red if it's defined. If it's colored in, that automatically makes you a generator. You cannot have a defined sacral and not be a generator. So that's your first kind of clue that you are a generator of some kind. And the sacral motor is the most powerful motor in the body. And what makes it so powerful is that it has sustainable energy in it, and it's able to kind of replenish itself pretty consistently. It's the energy that contributes to life force, both our own life force and the generated field of life force that permeates the world. Caveat though, for the sacral motor to be sustainable and for the sacral motor to replenish and have the capacity to continue building and working and engaging with life, it needs to be used in a correct manner. And what's cool about the sacral is that it has very discernible feedback that it can offer to you to let you know if it's available, if the energy in the sacral is available. And it does so through sound. So you'll often read about this when you look up the generator strategy. The sacral motor produces sound in response to life. It doesn't really produce sound in response to nothing, right? So sacral isn't just available to be injected into various projects or to initiate the creation of things. It really operates and wakes up when it's responding to something that's coming in from our outer reality. And the way that it responds is with the frequency that we translate as sound in several different ways. Most generator children come into this life making lots of sounds, in response to what they see. Ooh, ah, these kind of things. And most of us, or a lot of us, are kind of conditioned out of making those sounds as we mature. It's not necessarily polite to respond with sounds. And certainly if those sounds are signaling our honest kind of reaction to things, and that's not the reaction that we think the person asking or presenting the opportunity to us wants to hear, we can very easily be conditioned out of our sacral response, and the sacral can kind of atrophy and shut down. Your parent asks you, like, can you go clean your room? And your sacral goes, but, you say that to your parent and they say, or whatever they say, but likely they're not going to be very happy with that answer. And they say, go clean your room, or they say, use your sounds, or say yes, or, whatever it is. It's a pretty common occurrence that most generators sort of have a sense of what those sounds are, but have very much not been taught to use them. And so we end up in a pretty hairy situation where instead of making decisions from this gut level response, we end up making decisions with our mind. And usually, as we weigh the pros and cons of the decision we're trying to make, we factor in what the other person wants us to say. So the sacral motor responds based on its availability. If something comes into the outer reality of the generator, or even into the mind of the generator, and is asking or suggesting or seeing if the generator is available to apply their energy to, whatever the endeavor is, our sacral motor will usually make one of three sounds. It'll go, or it'll go, or it'll go, I'm not sure. And those sounds are signaling, again, our availability. So if you are a generator, the strategy is relatively simple. The hardest part of the strategy is learning how to wait, learning how to trust that if you, kind of do nothing, or if you, it sounds like you have to sit around and do nothing, but if you really tend to your own well-being, Get yourself prepared, get yourself calibrated, use your downtime to rest and to replenish and to recharge. The sacral will start to hum and the sacral will start to wake up. And by virtue of how the sacral impacts our aura, which for the generator is described as being open and enveloping, the sacral will start to attract lots of opportunities. Well, I should say the sacral, in addition to the magnetic monopole, which we'll talk about on another episode, will start to attract things to you to which you can have a response. And those things are not necessarily always a person coming into your life, asking you a question. Sometimes it's just something that you see, or scrolling through your phone, something that you have a reaction to. Or like I said, sometimes it could be an idea. Depending on the configuration of your head center and the ajna, the ideas that come to you may or may not be like your own ideas. They could just be ideas you're picking up like an antenna. So it is always important to really check in. Am I responding to this thing because I think I should? Or am I responding to this thing because it's sincerely kind of triggering activity or a response in my sacral? So when I say the strategy for the generator is relatively simple, it doesn't necessarily mean it's easy, because you have to confront a lot of conditioning as you embark on this journey. But it really is as simple as listening to your gut. Again, waiting and learning to wait, which is not necessarily just kind of waiting for something to happen. It's also really learning how to be, learning how to rest in your power, learning how to be, to breathe, to be less busy. And trust that, it doesn't take long before life will bring you something to which you can respond. So when we wait to respond, we queue up opportunities to come to us. When we clear out the obligations in our life that, perhaps are not correct for us, we free up the flow of opportunities coming our way. And as our sacral is able to recharge and replenish, we start to develop the reserves to then have these surges of activity or surges of growth in response to the things that life is bringing to us. I want to talk about the not self theme of the generator. Frustration is the not self theme, satisfaction being the kind of energy signature of a generator operating correctly. And I want to share some of what I've learned in a relatively short amount of time, but certainly some of my more recent understandings and revelations about the nature of these emotional themes or these emotional signatures have helped me understand the kind of cycles and rhythm of what it means to be a generator. And I'll do my best to share, to explain based on my experience here. So when I first learned about my type as a generator, I was sort of informed that one way that we can know if we're operating correctly as a generator is that we experience satisfaction. Most generators are not so much motivated by money or success or prestige or any of these things. We're motivated by the promise of satisfaction, what it feels like to apply our energy and plug our energy into the work that is correct for us. Us generators are the builders of the world. And despite what you might feel in relationship to the notion of work, we really are here to work. That said, we're here to do the work or to find the work that is the correct application of our unique kind of flavor of what it means to be a generator. And so a lot of generators are very obsessed with, I certainly have been in my life, very fixated on finding out my purpose, finding out what kind of work I'm here to do. It's almost like I want someone to just tell me, like, please tell me why am I here? What's the right application of this energy for me? And of course, that answer is not given. We're given kind of clues based on understanding our design, but it's really an answer that has to be discovered in response through the process of living life. Manifesting generators sometimes have an easier time plugging into that just because of their ability to kind of follow these divine impulses and urges. But for all generators, we're here to find the work that's correct for us. And the only way that we can discover that is by operating correctly and seeing what life both kind of brings to us and how it is we flow to the kind of puzzle piece, so to speak, that we can click into and really flourish. A lot of generators, um, we crave the process of mastery, of growing in mastery on whatever topics or subjects interest us, and we really are here to achieve mastery and to use our workforce energy to turn the things that inspire us into physical reality. So, I do want to say sometimes people will say like, generators can't manifest. Generators are not the creators. We're the builders. All of us have the ability to manifest, and all of us have the ability to create. It's just that the way that we manifest, or the way that we alchemize our physical reality or our ideas into physical reality, is unique for the generator. It really involves this aspect of, like I said, waiting and responding. So frustration. I was told that frustration is what happens when we are not operating correctly, or when we are saying yes to things that are really a no, or no to things that are really a yes. It clogs up our energy. It frustrates our aura. And as a result, we experience that signature, that theme. And that resonated with me, but it also was a challenging thing to understand, because even as I started to really diligently apply myself to my strategy and really check in, like, is this a yes, is this a no, and really do the work to kind of tend to my energy field and tend to my response, I still experienced a fair amount of frustration. I was like, am I doing this wrong? And I was presented with information that kind of helped clear some of this up. And that's really what I want to highlight today. So my understanding, and certainly my experience supports this, of us generators is that we tend to build things, or we tend to achieve mastery on what's called a stair-step kind of progression curve, where we enter into something through response. We get this initial surge of energy, surge of interest, surge of stamina to really achieve a new level of mastery in whatever it is we're building or whatever it is we're constructing. I think almost every generator can relate to this. We start a new project, enter a new relationship, like something that lights us up, and we say yes to it. And we go through this sort of honeymoon phase where we're just intoxicated by everything we're learning and everything, all the ways we're growing, and all the new kind of skills we're acquiring and achieving. And, after an initial period of surge, then we go into this plateau. And the plateau really requires that we rest on top of this kind of pedestal of mastery that we've just moved through, that we've just built, and allow our sacral motor to recharge. The sacral is somewhat of an inexhaustible energy resource, but it does need time, just like, everything, your phone, to like plug into the wall and recharge, replenish, and kind of get its juice back. And so oftentimes generators will enter into things, we have this surge of mastery, and then we'll sit at the top of that on a plateau so that we can prepare, rest, replenish, and get ready for the next surge, right? And so ideally, if we're entering into things correctly, we'll go through surge, plateau, wait, respond, surge, plateau, wait, respond, surge, plateau, wait, and so on until we achieve, not really there's an end result, but until we achieve the mastery that initially caused us to respond to the opportunity in the first place. Well, caveat, what often does happen, or what can happen, certainly this has happened in my life, is that, in the restlessness of the plateau, or, in the conditioning that we all receive that the plateaus are inappropriate, that we need to constantly be growing, constantly be up-leveling, constantly be expanding in our resources, in our success, whatever it is, we can sort of attempt to operate more like the manifestor type and initiate instead of wait. And when we initiate and take action on something not out of response, or when we respond to something and do it because we think we should, even though our sacral is not really giving us the feedback that it's correct for us, we can still enter into it and have a little bit of a surge, but then we get to the plateau at the top of that surge, and oftentimes we just end up giving up. We don't have the stamina to really go the distance, so to speak, because we never really had it in the first place. So this entering into things correctly, entering into things in response, really moving towards the things that light us up, ensure that we will have the stamina to move all the way through the various levels and progressions of the acquisition of the skill or of the project, of the endeavor. The other thing that can happen when we get to that first surge or go through that first surge, even if we've entered into it correctly, is we get to that plateau and nothing seems to be happening. Doesn't matter how hard we're working, doesn't matter how committed we are, how devoted we are, things kind of just slow down and there doesn't seem to be the same amount of growth that was there before. And it's really easy for us to believe that must mean that it's not correct for us, or that we're doing it wrong, or that like the universe is giving us a sign to give up, right? And oftentimes when that happens, we do indeed give up. So a lot of generators go through a lot of cycles of surge, plateau, give up, surge, plateau, give up, surge, plateau, give up. And we never get a chance to experience the satisfaction of mastery that occurs over time. So what I really want to highlight, because most of us are really good at the surge part, is what's up with these plateaus and how to interpret the sensations, the feelings, the restlessness that confront us in these plateaus. And so to circle back around, one of the things that we experience in these plateaus, even if we're operating quote unquote correctly, is the feeling of frustration. It feels frustrating to want to be moving and progressing and building and to feel like we're kind of stuck. A lot of generators, myself included, really feel at certain cycles of their life, this sense of stuckness that we really can't do anything about. And again, if you're feeling like you're kind of stuck, it's tempting to want to give up because the frustration of trying to, get something going when it's not time or when you don't have the capacity, or when nothing's coming to kind of trigger the response, sometimes is interpreted as a sign that you should give up. Now, giving up is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it is correct for us to let things go. But again, that can be something that we decide out of response. Someone might ask you, like, are you really enjoying this? Does this feel like the right use of your energy? Is it time to let this go? And if the answer is, then that would be a correct decision based on your response. Hope that makes sense. So when we land at these plateaus and we start to experience frustration, one helpful tip to kind of recontextualize what you're feeling is that frustration doesn't always mean that you're entering into things incorrectly. Sometimes, and often for us generators, frustration is just the feeling of us building up momentum for the next surge, right? It can feel frustrating, right? But we often compound upon that frustration by assigning or ascribing beliefs around it, that like, I'm frustrated because it's not working. I'm frustrated because I can't seem to make this happen. I'm frustrated because I'm not progressing, as opposed to just feeling that feeling of frustration, understanding that it's actually a good sign, or it can be a good sign that energy is starting to build, and trusting, and take inventory of your life. Look at the things that have worked, look at the things that haven't worked. Look at the relationships, the opportunities, the jobs, the experiences that have really been satisfying to you, and think about, like, how did that actually come into my life? Did it come into my life because I got an idea and then I forced that idea into manifestation? Or was I maybe holding the frequency of an idea or the frequency of an emotional response, and then something came into my life that I said yes to that led me either directly or indirectly into something new, much like how I shared my story with Finding Human Design. And so if in those plateaus you recognize that frustration is a sign that something good is coming, and really embrace and lean into that particular season of your progression curve, to take care of yourself and to ensure that when the time is right, you have the necessary reserves of energy built up, then we can start to make more satisfying use and more productive use of these so-called plateaus. So, this podcast is something that was born, or at least the idea was born in the midst of one of these plateaus for myself. I went through a pretty significant season of ascension, where I was growing in my business, growing in my mastery, growing in my understanding, and then I kind of like landed on top of everything that I had created, everything that I had achieved, all the satisfying experiences I've had. And I started to feel restless. I started to feel like, I don't know, like I mentioned before, if I have the stamina to keep going. I was pretty burnt out having built all that, and certainly building a lot of it in ways that weren't sustainable. And it also just started to feel kind of outdated, like my identity in the world as a yoga teacher in the way that I was. It felt kind of like an old costume or old clothes that didn't quite fit anymore. And it really, along with understanding my design, it put me into this phase where sort of everything needed to stop. And I just needed to pause. And I didn't know this consciously, but like even the opportunities that were coming to me, my sacral just kept saying, And, my mind had a lot of opinion about those responses. And certainly my splenic center, was delivering me lots of kind of fear around like saying no, or things I was interpreting as fear of saying no. But I'm starting to kind of recognize really what the function of all that was. So oftentimes when we stand on the top of everything that we've created, certainly if we've been at it for a long time, we can kind of look back and assess, like, is this really what I want to keep doing? Does this still feel like me? Is this supporting a narrative about who I am and why I'm here that feels resonant to the core of my being? And if the answer is no, then it really is time for us to realign. And I'm so grateful that I found human design right in the thick, or right in the onset of this sort of plateau for myself, because it's empowered me with greater understanding about who I am and why I'm here and how it is I go about, building and crafting the more beautiful world that I know is possible. And in this sort of recalibration, this kind of realignment and attunement to my purpose, I've been able to feel kind of my momentum build in a more powerful way. A friend, a fellow podcaster, had me on her podcast, Yoga Strong. Shout out to Bonnie Weeks, and she asked me, would you like to do a podcast of your own? And my sacral went, and so here we are. Right, this has been certainly a project that's been born out of me responding. It was an idea I had before. It was something that I thought maybe I should do, or it'd be a good strategy to do it. But that wasn't really the right way to enter into it, because every time I thought about it, I was like, it just sounds like too much work. But going into it this way, I found that I really do have the stamina and the interest and the necessary vitality and resources to follow the next logical step in getting this out into the world. So again, thank you for listening. I hope that you're experiencing value from this project and this offering. I want to also talk briefly about manifesting generators. I'm not a manifesting generator. I do not know what it feels like to be a manifesting generator, other than when the transits have me temporarily operating like one. But I do live with a manifesting generator. And I was raised by a single parent who is a manifesting generator. So a lot of my imprinting has come from being around or being in the conditioning field of manifesting generators. I'm not going to talk a lot about kind of the dynamics of the manifesting generator, but I will share that what makes a manifesting generator distinct from the pure generator is that y'all have the throat defined, those of you that are. You have your throat center defined, and you have a motor connected to that throat. Sometimes the motor is the ego center, sometimes it's the solar plexus, the root. But the pure archetype of the manifesting generator is to have a direct channel, it's the channel 2034, that connects the sacral motor to the throat. And the throat is where we get things out into the world. It's where we manifest, it's where we communicate. And it's also where we receive, those of you that are either manifestors or manifesting generators, it's where you sort of receive and express and act upon the creative flow that moves through you in the form of impulses and urges. So manifesting generators are the only type that by design can initiate, because they have this sort of nonverbal creative flow that moves through them, that is kind of giving them access to the right timing to say something, to do something, to follow a spark of creativity. The strategy for the manifesting generator is to inform others before they act. And again, we'll talk about that another time, but it really is just a tip or a technique to kind of clear the path around them so that their creative flow, so that their impulses and urges that are divinely inspired are not obstructed. Right? And get more peace in their life by letting others know what they're doing before they do it so that people don't get in their way. Now, if you're a manifesting generator, it means that you have that ability to initiate, but you're still a generator. So to get that motor going where then you can start to manifest, you still need to wait to respond. The response will likely directly motorize the throat and result in you kind of saying or doing something. And so then, that added ingredient of informing others becomes useful. So because the manifesting generator has sort of this extra creative burst of inspired energy that y'all can use once you've entered into something, this kind of stair-step progression curve takes on a different flavor, a different flair for the MG. So from what I witnessed and from what I understand, and certainly what has proved resonant to the MGs that I talk to, when you enter into something as a manifesting generator and you respond to it, what often will happen is you'll kind of enter into it, you'll get this initial surge, but instead of going from like the entry level to like level 1 and then plateauing, sometimes you'll like jump ahead multiple levels. You might go from like entry into like level 3, level 4 all at once because you've responded and then you followed all these urges and impulses and they've kind of jumped you ahead in the timeline, right? You get to skip steps. One of the purposes of the manifesting generator in the kind of quantum interfacing and collaboration of all of our different sparks of consciousness is that the manifesting generator is here to show us what steps we can skip. You're here to show us how to speed up the creative process. Us pure generators, rather, we have a bit more of a meticulous kind of progression to get from where we are to where we want to be. We kind of have to go through every step. There may be steps that are not really essential for us, but we still have to kind of go through them, even if we don't stay there very long. The manifesting generator doesn't have much of a tolerance for going and doing steps that don't seem necessary. And so oftentimes y'all will skip a whole bunch of steps and kind of arrive at this kind of advanced place of aptitude or of experience relative to the time you've been spending actually engaging in the process. So then what happens, and this I think is really interesting, what happens for the manifesting generator that skips some steps is that as you kind of plateau at that new level, it can start to feel like, whoa, I'm kind of out of my depth here, right? Like I'm really happy that I'm here, but I don't know necessarily how I got here. I don't know how to sustain this. And I don't have so much of a strong foundation to stand on because I didn't really build the steps incrementally. And so life will sort of kick in and as a result, you'll be required to go back and revisit or visit some of the steps that you might have skipped, not for long, but you may need to go back and just fill in some of the gaps that you might have missed or fill in some of those spaces that you need in order to fortify the position that you're in. And so it can feel like, and then you add on to this the way that we're conditioned, it can feel like you're making all this progress, you're leapfrogging over all these steps, you're achieving greatness in a relatively short amount of time, and then you have to go backwards, right? And then, life gives you a reality check that actually you're not ready or you're not actually progressing. Actually, you have to regress. It's interesting. I used to teach, I still do, I suppose, a lot about movement regressions and progressions relative to the yoga practice primarily. And I learned about them initially from one of my good friends, brilliant teacher, Trina Altman. Perhaps we'll have her on the show one of these days. Shout out to Trina. But she had a workshop called Regress to Progress. And there were several meanings to that. One of the meanings that I liked is that sometimes in order to progress in life, we actually have to regress and rediscover, something about, revisit or rediscover some aspect of a regressed movement pattern, as the case was in that context, so that we could learn something new that would help us progress forward. And so, life doesn't always follow this linear path. It's not like we're just constantly, steadily progressing. Sometimes to get to the next step, we need to go back and revisit something, right, that can give us the necessary insight and information, or build the necessary foundation for us to then kind of skyrocket forward again. And so that happens for the manifesting generator. And I talk to a lot of manifesting generators that, at the time that I'm encountering them, they've recently had to regress and go back and fill in a step that they've skipped. And oftentimes they get paralyzed in that position, or the frustration is so great, because you're meant to really speed up the process and really achieve that mastery. When you have to go backwards, it's like, it can feel like a sign from the universe or from God or from whatever that like, it's not working, you should give up. And so really, really important for the manifesting generator, if you've entered into things correctly, if you're following your strategy and your authority, and life is asking you to go back and fill in a step, feel the frustration of that. You are being asked to kind of slow down to build up more momentum, but know that that frustration is a sign that you're establishing the foundation, establishing the understanding, building up the resources that you will use to then skyrocket again ahead a few, and skip however many steps. So the trajectory, to the outside world may look scattered. It may look like you're doing a whole bunch of things at once, that you need to pick a thing, that you need to stay focused on a process, blah, 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 blah. None of that is correct for you guys. And that's okay. In fact, thank you. Thank you for showing all of us, how we can move forward with more efficiency. And thank you, for also showing us that it's okay to have to go backwards sometimes and reestablish something that's needed for us to move forward more skillfully, more sweetly, and with increased satisfaction. We'll leave it at that for today. I would love to hear from you guys. If you are currently in a surge, if you're currently in a plateau, if you are in the process of kind of weeding through all of the no's in your aura and making some necessary changes in your life, how's it going? How are you doing? Are you doing good? Are you feeling satisfied? Are you experiencing frustration? Is it okay to be frustrated sometimes when we have to wait? Is it okay to wait? Is it okay to just be? Is it okay to just be? Can you trust that you are powerful? Can you trust that things are being queued up all the time behind the scenes, specifically and expressly for you and for your satisfaction? Do you love to work when the work is correct? Is it miserable to do work when the work isn't correct? Is it possible to clear out some of the incorrect work so that more of the correct work can flow to you? Do you trust in the power of your sacral? Do you trust in the value of who you are? Do you trust in your capacity to turn the ideas that inspire you into physical form through the devotion of your brilliant and beautiful energy? Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I will look forward to spending some more time with you in next week's episode. And until then, be well, be satisfied, be yourself, love yourself. And I'll talk to you soon. Peace out, y'all.